Okay, this is the report and what it looks like. And we will, I don't know if there's currently like a place out there where you can just click on a link and get it. If anybody knows that and you have it, can put it in the chat. Um, please do. We haven't created that yet, but we will create a link for this so that you can have your own copy. And this is just the letter. It starts with a letter to the state superintendent, who's Lance Evans, just kind of telling them what this is about. And here's a summary of the things they found when they came that they were concerned about. So we'll start here. And OSEP, does anybody know what that stands for? All these, there's always lots of acronyms and reports. It's not a quiz. I just don't want to leave anyone behind. It's seeing if it's spelled out anywhere. It's out of the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, Office of Special Education Programs. So OSEP is the Office of Special Education Programs. That's who issued this report. And they're in Washington, D.C., and the state, federal government, federal rules, federal law trumps state law. So that's why the federal government can come in and say, these are the things you need to be working on. So the first thing they found was that the state, and that would be mostly the State Department of Education, does not have a good general supervision system that is reasonably defined to identify noncompliance with all the IDEA Part B requirements in a timely manner. So that basically means that MDE does not have a system set up where it should be going out and looking at all the school districts and monitoring them and making sure that they're going by the laws. And IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And Part B means children 3 to 21. So the children that are in K through 12, and then the ones who are as young as 3, that they're obligated to find and help, that they're just saying, and this probably sums up a lot, that the State Department of Education doesn't have a good system in place to get out there and make sure that the districts are doing what they're supposed to do to make sure children with disabilities get the services and supports they need so they have the same opportunity to learn in school that other children do. So everything else kind of comes out of that. Is anybody surprised by that finding, or does anybody see it differently? What y'all think? How do you guys think the State Department of Education is doing on making sure that districts are doing what they need to do to help children with disabilities at school? Our kids, oh, we do have things in the chat. Okay, so not surprised. This tracks with what we've already known. Okay, so it's pretty consistent. I'm sorry, I forgot to look at the chat. Okay, so then they go on to say they're not monitoring. And then in the event, maybe they do monitor and tell districts, oh, you need to start doing this. They don't have a system to go back and make sure they're doing that. And they're not looking at the kind of data or information that they're supposed to see if problems get corrected. And when you see LEA, that's the local education authority, and that's usually the school district. So they're not looking at what they need to find. And we don't even know if that data exists because it says the state hasn't even submitted valid and reliable data. And when you see CFR and these different numbers, that's law, the number of the law that they're citing. So information on data not being reliable, and that they don't have to monitor all those districts, you're going to have some sort of system in place that has computers and ways to track things, that they don't have that. And again, those of you who are attorneys, I know I'm using pretty simple language here. If I'm saying anything that is not on target, feel free to correct me. Okay, this is an area we were really, really interested in, state complaints. And those of you all who know us well know that one thing we have done since 2015, we made a deliberate decision at that point to become much more focused on assisting families with filing formal state complaints. Because that's something when there's a dispute about special education and trying to figure out, is the district or is the school doing what they should be doing? That's something that the law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says is available to anyone. Anyone can file a formal state complaint. And that's in the law, in the federal law, and the state education authority, which in this case would be Mississippi Department of Education, has to say whether or not they're going to investigate that complaint. And then if they investigate it and they find that it's true, that it's substantiated, they're supposed to make the district and hold the district accountable through all that data we just read about, to make sure that they correct that situation for that student and for every similarly situated student. Now, we're not saying that thing about them correcting it for every similarly situated student. And that means all the other students who are in that situation. So things like if a district is calling and saying your child is behaving badly and they haven't, that either the child doesn't have an IEP or they haven't done anything to update the IEP to address the behavior, and they're saying just come pick them up. That could be the basis for a complaint. And if this was working the way it should, the district should have to correct it for that child and then be held accountable from the Mississippi State Department of Education for correcting that practice with all children. They should stop doing it with other families too. Okay, so we were really, really interested in this section, and in part because you don't need an attorney to file a complaint, a formal state complaint. So OSEP, again, the Office of Special Education Programs, finds that the state's regulations, procedural safeguards, and state complaint procedures contain provisions that are inconsistent with the following IDEA requirements. So they're saying there's things that are happening with your complaint procedure that are not in keeping with the law. Okay. They said, and these are some of the things, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the things that really stood out to us. The state model for filing a formal state complaint. So there is a form, and it's on our website too. That's on MDE's website and on our website, because we have the link to theirs, for a form families can use but don't have to use, or anyone can use to file a formal state complaint. They're saying there's some issues with it. They're saying there's some issues with complaints filed by non-parent complainants, because remember, anyone can file a complaint. How they calculate their 60-day timeline for that, extensions. Okay, so there's some issues with complaints, and we'll look at those in more detail. And then we were really interested in this. OSEP finds that the state's procedure requiring parties to sign a mediation confidentiality pledge to the commencement of mediation is inconsistent with the law. And those of you who know us well know that, of course, we're going to support families in doing whatever they want to do, but we discourage families from agreeing to mediation because they get so locked in. And we find that districts and mediation is when you say, okay, there's this issue on the table, but we're going to meet and see if we can just get it worked out. That can be a great idea if both parties are really committed to getting it worked out and following through on the solution. But what we found is maybe that'll happen, but then there will be some going back on the agreement, and the family has already signed something that says they're not going to talk about what happened. So their hands end up getting really tied. Then they also found another process that's available to families when they have a dispute with a school district over the way things are going in special education is due process. Now, in our state, groups like ours can to some extent help with that. There's been opinions by the attorney general that can limit that a bit. And one thing that can happen with due process, and that's an advantage of due process, with a formal state complaint, if a family has a dispute with a school district or anyone does, and they try to resolve it through a formal state complaint, if MDE says, Mississippi Department of Education says, nope, we don't see any problem here. That's kind of where it ends. There's not a way to appeal it. With due process, it can go to court. And so obviously you have to have an attorney at that point. So you have more options to keep going with due process, but it also involves you would need an attorney. And so there's we are getting more attorneys in the state who can do this kind of work, but there's not a whole lot. So it's an advantage. It can be an advantage, but it can also be in that you can go further with the complaint, but it can be a disadvantage because it can be hard to find representation. I'm also saying that to say we don't do a lot with due process. It does require an attorney if it goes beyond the district court. But they're saying there's issues with that, again, with the form, with the processes, with the timelines, how it gets implemented. And we thought this was really interesting. There's issues with the training and minimum qualifications for the due process hearing officers. And these, when it's still due process before it would ever go to court, if it goes to court, these are heard by hearing officers that I think, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, that the Mississippi Department of Education assigns, I think. And there have been concerns for years that the people who are hearing these may not necessarily be qualified to hear them. And it looks like OSEP may have agreed with that. Discipline and behavior, OSEP finds that the state was unable to provide evidence of the implementation of the state's responsibility for programmatic monitoring under IDA Part B that demonstrates compliance with the monitoring and enforcement requirements. So related to discipline and behavior, that was very interesting to us. So that's the overview of the areas that they found concerning. So it's that MD's not doing monitoring like they should. There's problems with the complaint process and due process. So, and those are the two ways that families have when there's an issue with the district or the school to be able to do something. And then with discipline and behavior. Then you can see it goes into detail about these different areas. Now, I'm not sure how to get my screen. And I'll be able to get it. Maybe not. They give detail of why, like what's required and then what issues they found, the conclusions they came to, and what they're requiring the state to do. So it goes into a lot of detail in the second part of the report. I'm just going to give you some examples.
Miss Joy, I have a question. When question time comes available.
Oh, question time is any time in this group. So go.
So my question was the company aware that they were not monitoring correctly, or is there just an error that they're just not doing what they're supposed to do, or?
Okay. Um, that's a very good question. So the group that was supposed to be monitoring is the Mississippi State Department of Education, the special education people within that state agency. Um, what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it is clearly defined in law. So it's not like these were hidden requirements. These legal requirements that they're putting on here, those are in federal law and federal policy. The State Department of Education can go read them and do them. They can ask for help. To get information about this, the federal people came and monitored the state. They were here in person. They looked at a lot of data, and they also got a lot of feedback from families and other people on the ground. So that was really important. So I don't know. With that background, what do y'all think? Do you think and so the company that you're talking about that was supposed to be doing this would actually be the Mississippi State Department of Education. I mean, what do you all think? Do you think they knew what they were supposed to be doing? That's a very good question. And I've shared my thoughts. What do other people think? And you can see right here on this one, it's like it says, the state must have a data system that is reasonably designed to collect and report valid and reliable data and information to the department and to the public in a timely manner and ensure that the data collected and reported reflects actual practice and performance. So that's in writing. You have to have a system that does this. And then they couldn't produce the data that showed that they did that. Y'all are being awfully quiet. And also keep in mind, the State Department of Education, like all of these due process complaints and all of these formal state complaints they get, that's giving them information too. Like, and Families as Allies staff, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not usually the one helping families file complaints. But I know we help families file a lot of complaints. It may be, I don't know, 50 or 60 a year. I'm not sure. Um, but it's a lot. And those tend to be, because we've monitored this, we've collected data on this, they seem to be about the same, like 12 things over and over and over and over again. So I can almost guarantee you that this within the past 12 months, we have helped families file more than one complaint about this whole thing of families being called to come pick their kid up because of their behavior, but there's nothing on the IEP to address behavior, or the child's never been identified as needing an IEP, even though the school district is giving us lots of information that to indicate that they suspect the child has a disability related to behavior that affects their ability, adversely affects their ability to learn. So they're also, I know from us and from others, getting due process complaints, I think. I don't know as much about those informal state complaints that are saying these are the issues. So there's that source of data too. Okay, I can't see y'all because I got this up here. Any thoughts or questions about that? Especially y'all from, I don't want to put you on the spot, but y'all from Mississippi Center for Justice. Do you have any additional thoughts about that?
I do. I put it in the chat,
Okay, go
but
for it.
um yeah, the data piece, especially, I mean, we with some coalition partners put in a public records request for data and they weren't able to give us anything concrete or helpful in response to those questions. And so if they aren't collecting data that is reliable, that does a huge disservice to the public as well. If the public is looking for information, and they just don't have it, then, and how do we evaluate effectiveness of programs? How do we make changes that are data driven? It's a huge sort of foundational problem, in my
So
view.
was that oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Was that before OSEP came?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even before they came, here you had evidence because you were like, you're supposed to be collecting this data. Can we see it? This would help us. And they couldn't
Mhm.
produce it. And this is
Right.
data that the law says they're supposed to have.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So there's something big going on here.
hmm
Okay, and I'm looking through. I'm skimming as we're talking. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions thus far? Okay. This in these details, and again, I am just scrolling through, so I may miss something, but these are some things that jumped out at us when we got to the parts about filing a formal state complaint. The state's, I'm looking over here, the fatter column. The state's model form contains provisions that restrict the parties subject to the state complaint procedures. By using the term school district or district, individuals and organizations do not have notice. And this is something that I knew, but I don't think I'd thought about for a while, that the IDEA, and that's the law about special education, complaint procedures are available to resolve allegations against not only LEAs, and that's school districts, local education authorities, and schools, but also this SEA, that's the State Education Authority, which is the Mississippi Department of Education, and other agencies included in the definition of public agency. Now, at the state level, and I am going to ask you again, I'm going to ask you to help me here, Lily. Is there another state agency level besides MDE that would be relevant to this? I can't think of any.
I think it's just MDE. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought, but just double checking. So, what this means is, and remember, anyone can file a complaint. For us, we've typically helped families file them. We're looking more at us just filing them if the family wants us to. So we're looking at that whole issue. Um, and now that there's this special education coalition that Lily referred to also, and this is something we've wanted for a long time to look at patterns of complaints and that type of thing. But what this is talking about is anyone can file a complaint, and they can file it not only against a school or a school district and say this school or this school district did not, they violated the special education law, and you don't have to know everything about IDA. You can just know some basic things that it says. And this is what my complaint's about, that people can also, what this is saying, file complaints against the Mississippi Department of Education. Oh, thank you, Lily. Oh, okay, luxury. This is a good question. And I'm not monitoring. Has anything changed from the previous year with this data? Are the findings the same each year, meaning are they being addressed? I think these monitoring visits, are they every 5 years, every 4 years? They're several years apart. So Mississippi, I think, oh, it's 5, has had challenges every time they've had one of these. I don't, and I don't remember from the last time. I don't know if they were as significant last time as this time. So there's always been challenges, and there's no indication from what I am aware, and if anyone's aware differently, let me know, that any of these things are improving. If anything, there are more concerns. So one thing to keep in mind, and this is one thing we really want, especially if you're a family member or someone who works closely with families, to keep in mind. It's not, you have the option of filing a complaint not only against a school district or school, but also against the Mississippi State Department of Education. So sometimes we have had families that have tried to get assistance from MDE, and I will say many times that MDE, Mississippi Department of Education, has been helpful, and they have that special education hotline and are sometimes able to quickly intervene with districts, and we've seen that happen. And any of you who've called us know that that's one thing we suggest. If you've been through our parent peer support training, you know that number is like in bold through your training, encouraging families. So we're not saying that MDE is always remiss on this, but there's times that they could be perceived as not doing everything they can to ensure that that child's rights under the special education law are being followed, so you can file complaints against MDE itself. And I do remember one very telling time this happened, and this may have happened at other times, but this was years ago. There was a lawsuit against Jackson Public Schools for some of the things they were doing with special education. And that lawsuit became a lawsuit, was filed by Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. And then they turned around, and I don't think it was just a complaint, but they then sued or did a complaint against MDE because they said that never would have happened if MDE was doing its job monitoring Jackson Public Schools. And I think that's what we're seeing here is OSEP came into the state and said, yes, there's a lot of problems probably with all these different districts, but the real problem is this group that's supposed to be monitoring all the districts and making sure that they do what they're supposed to do is not. And both things are a problem, but the fact that the state isn't monitoring this is a real issue. So that's just something to think about going forward with formal state complaints. Does this have anything to do with these things that this report's talking about, that the State Department isn't implementing this the way they should be, and they're not monitoring the way they should be? And one thing we've thought a lot about, and this has probably come up with other groups and probably in that special education coalition, and maybe I don't remember it specifically, but I'm not always there, is this whole idea that one thing should be happening is when MDE, the Mississippi Department of Education, does say, yeah, this complaint is valid and this district has to fix it this way. We've never seen a lot of evidence that they're making the district fix it for anybody except the specific child that the complaint is about, and not looking at all the similarly situated children. That means children in that same situation. So we're hoping that this might be a way to address some of that. So that really stood out to us, that it's not just a school district that you can file a complaint against. It's this Mississippi State Department of Education. So one thing that they're telling the state to do is change their model form so it makes it clear that you can file a complaint, not just against the district, but you can file it against Mississippi State Department of Education. And this brings up charter schools too. One thing, and I think our state actually does understand this, but sometimes it's confusing for families who are considering filing a complaint. All the charter schools in our state are public schools. So if your child is in a charter school, you can still file, and you have a concern about special education services and you're considering filing a complaint, the complaint process applies to charter schools too, interstate. Okay, this is all about that. This is saying that they have that model form and they're supposed to have a model form. Now they're going to have to change it to make it clear who all you can file a complaint against. But they're saying that that families or anyone filing a complaint doesn't have to use that form. And they're also saying that the state puts some things on those forms that you don't have to have. Okay. And some of those things are the child's age or date of birth. Also, I thought this was very interesting, efforts to resolve the complaint informally. And that is a question on there. And we have had families tell us, I haven't done anything to try to resolve the complaint. And maybe they don't even want to talk to the school because they feel intimidated or scared of what the school's going to do. And what this is saying is that question shouldn't even be on there because it's not required to be on there. And I don't know why it's on there, but being on there may make people feel like, oh, I have to do that first, or I can't file this complaint. And that's not true. So they're saying that needs to be taken off of there. Now, also they're saying there's some things on there that need to be marked as optional if they're on there, because they don't have to be on there. And those include the family's information, including the parent's name, address, mail address, and phone number. Now, I just want to stop here and have y'all think and share your thoughts. Why do you think they're emphasizing that those things are optional and it should be clearly said on the form that putting the parent's name, address, email address, and phone number are optional? Any thoughts about why that might even be a deal? I mean, that's true. Those are optional things to put on there. They need to be marked as optional so people don't feel like they have to put them on a complaint form. Any thoughts about why that might be important or might be relevant to families, especially? I went to forgetting to look in the chat. Maybe to avoid retaliatory practices. If parents or orgs want to submit anonymized information or if parents are in between housing. Okay, exactly. Do y'all have any idea what is one of the, and I don't know, some of y'all may have filed complaints before, and I don't know if we, and I don't know if we have any families on here who have, and I'm not trying to get you, put yourselves on the spot, but what do you think is one of the most common things that happens as soon as a family files a complaint, if it's a family that files it? At least from what we've seen.
The child may be treated differently, Miss Joy.
That's a huge one. The child may be treated differently, and that's a huge worry. Very good point. We also find that families commonly get called. Or we even had a family, now this was several years ago, so I hope things like this aren't still happening. We had a family where like they got followed to the gas station and whoever it was from the district, I don't know if they just saw them out somewhere, but anyway, while they were pumping their gas, had a district person trying to talk to them. And guess what when those calls and conversations, guess what they're typically asking, at least from what we hear? Yes, and this could be particularly scary for families who around immigration. You're right. Any thoughts on what we commonly hear these calls are about? Okay, anyone from families is allies? What do we hear? What do they want the family to do?
Stop the complaint.
Exactly. Withdraw that complaint. We will give you whatever you want. We will give you more. Just withdraw that complaint. Now, that's going to be a little harder to do if the phone number's not right there. So that really stood out to us. Okay. Any other thoughts about that? Okay, and I think what this is saying, if somebody else files the complaint, because of this additional information, I think this part is confusing. Lily, do you understand this part? What this is really saying? That if the complainant is the parent, contact information is required, but is optional if the complainant is someone other than the parent.
Yeah,
Are they just
so
saying the two forms are different?
um I think let's see. So the asterisk, I don't know if this is connected, but I think that they dinged them on the idea that if it's not a parent filing, there needs to be additional documentation showing that there's
Yeah,
some connection. Um,
that's what I think they're saying too. And that anyone can file a complaint. It shouldn't have to be this written, that the family gave written permission and is giving that written permission to MDE. I mean,
right.
yeah, right. That's what I thought was saying too, but this is really confusing. But I think that's what it's saying.
Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what
And
it means
but
by
I'm not trying to put words in your
information.
mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, that part is confused because it seems like it's more tied to the issue above about the contact information rather than
Right.
the authorization.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think they can require, because anyone can file a complaint. And sometimes parents would prefer, even if they've told someone like us, yes, I want you to file a complaint. They don't want to put something in writing that, oh, yeah, I told Joy over there at Families as Allies to go ahead and do this, because that's going to could create the same retaliatory attitude of them filing it themselves. So there shouldn't have to be anything in writing saying they gave me permission. I can just do that. But yeah, that part's okay. I'm glad that's confusing. The way it's written is confusing, but I think they're getting at, or this may be. Okay, so this is getting at okay, that up there is confusing, but I think this is getting at what we're saying. The state must resolve a state complaint regardless of whether or not it's been filed by the child's parent or by an organization or individual other than the child's parent. In resolving such a complaint, the state would be required to follow the minimum state complaint procedures as it would for any other state complaint. So they can't make different rules. Okay, but a consent or authorization to disclose confidential information. So I think that's MDE disclosing back. That is signed by the parent must be submitted in order for MDE to provide the findings and decisions to the complainant. So that makes sense. I can file a complaint and I don't have to have the permission to file a complaint. I can just know this is happening. But the results, because that's confidential information about the child, I can't have unless the parent signs. See. Okay, so the state's policies and procedures do not provide for a case-by-case determination of the information that must be withheld. So they're not looking at it, they're not individualizing it when resolving a complaint filed by someone other than the child's parent. And then when they looked at this, they advised that MDE should not withhold relevant information that's not protected about that child from the complainant regarding the results of their complaint resolution. So things, if I file a complaint, MDE can't tell me, oh, we're just not going to tell you anything because you're not the parent. They need to give me information about my complaint and what happened with it that doesn't compromise that child's confidentiality. But I think what they're doing now is just not sharing anything. Okay. Another thing they were doing is how they calculated the 60-day timeline. So they have 60 days from the time they receive the complaint. But what they're doing is saying they have 60 calendar days from the date the complaint is verified by the district to conduct its education or evaluation. So they're going in and they're basically padding things so they have more time and they're supposed to do it within 60 days. Okay. I'm going to stop here. We're going to go over a couple other things, but kind of run out of time. Those were the main things we wanted to share with you from that. Oops, I lost you guys. And I appreciate everyone being here. And the main things we wanted to let you know is because we thought these were the most relevant to what we see families dealing with, that on formal state complaints, they can be filed against MDE as well as the school district. And one thing MDE is supposed to be doing is monitoring the school district. So if you're filing a complaint, you're thinking, I think this also has to do with MDE not monitoring or not doing their part, or, I called them for help and this is what happened. And that appears to be a violation of the special education law. It can't just be, well, they weren't nice to me or something like that. But that you have that option, that some of the information that's now requested on there is optional, including putting your phone number on there and your address. So that's not going to take care of every retaliatory thing that happens, but it's a sliver that helps. And that people, just to remind you, who are not parents can file complaints, and there is some information that they should be given on how those are resolved. Now, real quick, because I'm not leaving her much time, there's another option you have if you're having concerns about the special education system, and it's a group that exists. Nikki, are you where you can talk? She may or may not be.
Say Fred, Nikki or Nikki?
Oh, I was saying Nikki. I
Oh,
know.
okay.
This is just like old times where we're calling y'all the same name. I'm not sure she can talk, but Nikki is actually on the special education advisory panel. And that's a group that meets, I think, once a month. And it's made up of parents and other people who have an investment in the special education system. And they are a group that you can go to. Are you where you can talk, Nikki? Can you just talk
Yeah,
about that
I'm
group for
here.
us? Okay, and
So
then
we
do a
meet,
public.
we primarily meet monthly. Sometimes there's a skip in the summer, but if you have parents that are having concerns, they can come. There are public comments during every meeting, and they can share whatever concerns they have pertaining to their child's needs being met. I think a lot of people don't know that they have that opportunity almost monthly. And then there's MDE staff there, as well as committee members who are going to try to help you resolve that.
So that's always an option that's available, and we wanted to make sure everyone knew about that. And those meetings, they should be posted on the state's public meeting site. They're not, so that's something we're pushing for, but they are posted on MDE site. We try to put them on our site every month, and put them in our newsletter. And you can attend those virtually or in person. Well, they're usually, some of them are just virtual, so we encourage you to do that, and you can always give public comment. Okay, well, we are at the end of our time. Is there any last words anyone wanted to say real quick? I'm so grateful to everyone for being here. Okay. All right. Well, we end all of our meetings with go forth and conquer, because we know as family members and those who are partnering with us as family members, that if we all stand together, there's nothing we can't do for our children. Thank y'all. And thanks for being here, and come back. Okay. Bye, y'all.